Hi, I'm Tor Jorgensen with Alaska Ecoscience. It's springtime again in Alaska, 2022, and I'm out excited to look at new adventures in the world of degrading permafrost. Today we're looking at a new feature, a thermokarst feature that extends down into the valley. It's a long active layer detachment slide, and now it's starting to thaw down into the ice-rich permafrost. We first noticed it flying back from the Yukon Flats last fall, and then I looked up on the satellite imagery, and the first evidence of it was on a mid-July Landsat image. So it probably took off, slid off early in the summer during the spring freshet or early summer thaw. But we'll go down the feature and look at all kinds of interesting little developments related to erosion, to thaw, to slumping, and we'll try to reconstruct what happened along the way. We're looking at the head wall scarp, the very high end of the feature. We're on the side slope of Wickersham Dome. We're in the valley of Washington Creek watershed. And here we have the walls are collapsing. There's a deep central pool, probably a real ice-rich zone, and then a bit of a shoulder before it starts its slide almost a kilometer down the valley. Here we have an underground spring that's contributing to the water flow down the creek, and then we have some ice that's formed during the winter time, and then we have some ice-rich material on the side. So that water's probably piping down through a tunnel through the ice-rich material. It could be through an ice wedge network, but I haven't seen any evidence of ice wedges yet. We'll look for some along the way. Here we're looking at melting of thawing of the ice-rich soil along the head wall, and then we have saturated flow, a mud flow going down into the center pool. I took a look at the high-resolution imagery when I was up here, and it looks like this originated from a open system pingo, and that's why we have this deep central pool of water in the middle, and that's why the bottom is able to be depressed down below the outlet of the saturated flow, the detachment slide. And that's why we probably have that underground water that was feeding the open system pingo, where water moves to the freezing front and keeps on heaving up a large central mound of ice-cored mound. Here you have a small crevasse developing, cracking along the head wall, and slumping of materials down into the central pool. Now we get a better view of the central core of the open system pingo, and then its failure on the side of it that helped initiate a very large active layer detachment slide. I just finished installing a time-lapse camera on the other side of the central pool. I'm going to take a picture every day throughout the summer and through the winter, and hopefully we can keep that camera going for multiple years. Part of my objective today was to fly a drone and do some orthometric mapping, produce numerous flight lines of overlapping images, and use that to through a drone deploy to make a orthomosaic, and then to create a DEM. We can use that for baseline to look at future settlement and erosion of the detachment slide. We're looking just below the open system pingo, and at the initial starting point of the slide, it looks like it thawed down pretty near through the active layer, so maybe even by midsummer, but it sheared off right through the mineral surface and made a very slick pan. It's now starting to desiccate and dry. Then it turned the corner before heading straight downhill. A little farther down we see some of the mats, organic mats that rode down on top of the slide and now have been left behind. Here we have an island that was left in the middle with flow going on either sides, and you can see the force of the weight of that debris sliding downhill just sheared the tops of these black spruce off. And now we're starting to see some recovery in terms of vigorous sprouting of the Ceratodon purpureus, moss well established to moist, disturbed surfaces, mineral surfaces in particular. And now we see the first portion of gully down cutting and erosion. Further down we have some deeply incised gullies. We had a lot of snowfall this winter, not quite a record around Fairbanks, but probably in the top 10 snow years. So a lot of snow melt coming down through this detachment slide and did a lot of erosion gullying out. We don't have very much water flowing through the system right now, but we're losing volume both through thaw settlement and erosion. So we have kind of a thermal erosion, some heat transfer from the creek. We have mechanical erosion, and then we have some thaw settlement of ice-rich materials down below. And then we have some colluvial activity, thaw slumping from the sides. And you can see a lot of debris was pushed up along the margins as the slide went downhill. Here we have some subsurface flow. Occasionally the water tunnels down either through some thawing, extremely ice-rich silt, or maybe there's some wedge ice that it's tunneled down through. We haven't yet found any wedge ice, but I'll keep my eyes open for it. We'll be looking to see if that's a factor of this as a strong indicator of this being the Edema material. But you can see there's substantial down cutting still going on. It's quite a slope for it to erode and gully through the next few years. In a few places we see that it's eroded down to some rocky colluvium, so it's hit a hard layer of recalcitrant erosion. And then still all the remarkable amount of debris that was pushed up during the active portion of the sliding. Then you can see the bench on the sides, kind of the initial surface that was exposed after the active layer detached and slid down the hill. And then presumably we've had some additional thaw settlement. So now we have a bank on the side that's maybe 1 meter to 1.5 meters above this initial surface exposed by the slide. Occasionally we can see water coming out of the surface of the thawing active layer and making little rivulets down the side. You can see little sediment fans that get deposited. So we've got some fluvial erosion plus some colluvial slumping along the sides. So a lot of different processes going on within a single thermokarst feature. Here we have a nick point with a little bit of a falls going into a little plunge pool. Presumably there was some real ice-rich material that thawed out right there. And then it started to carve itself ever deeper into the fine-grained silt. Here we see exposed some remnants of the off-ice, overflow ice that formed through the wintertime. that probably helped provide a barrier for erosion cutting down through the overflow ice, off ice initially, but then once it cut down subsurface, it's now about 3 meter below that off ice layer. Here we can see a much thicker remnant of that off ice. Here it's probably 30-40 centimeters thick in spots. And we have a lot of material slumping and sliding down over that ice. Now we've gotten down to one of the initial terminuses of the active layer detachment slide. A lot of the debris pushed up into the forest right there. And then we turn the corner through a little pinch point. Still see part of the shoulder initial surface right there of the initial boundary between the slide, and then it broadens up again. Now we're about 3/4 of the way down. It's become narrower, more deeply incised into a central gully, and now we're getting more continuous overflow ice that built up over the winter. Well, walking down along the way, just happened to luck out and find an exposure where it's been cut down by a separate little flow of water down a little swale. An exposure is always a gift, to be able to look back in time and get a better understanding of the materials, the structure of the deposits that led to this active layer detachment and subsequent gulling in ice-rich materials. You can even see some evidence of past thermokarst. Here we have some big organic masses that have been subducted in the thawed material. Evidence of diaparism of different densities of materials. I'm going to spend a little time cleaning off the surface, see if we can get down and see what the ground ice, segregated ice looks like.